time, I'm like, I don't really follow it that hard, but I do remember that specifically with you. And then also when you did your presentation that day, you spoke so well, and it felt like it almost felt as if it's like you'd prefer doing these presentations over like over the sales training that you're doing.
Yeah. I think that we're launching my speaking business this year, and I'm really excited about that. But I think that a lot of the trainings I do are just more personalized versions of what you saw.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, like when it comes to, like you mentioned, like I was going in hard on football, and really it's what I'm trying to do is go in hard on something I can connect with someone over. In that situation, there were a group of us, and that was the common thing we could bond over and talk about. But in other settings, I lead with something totally different.
Yeah.
But my wife has always said that there's, looking at men talk, there's a real value to having like just that general knowledge of sports or whatever, because it is just something that men can typically connect over pretty quickly.
Yeah,
But,
I agree. To be honest, like after something like that, and I was just thinking about it this year, it's like, maybe I should just know this a little bit more, because I feel like that's some of the most common things is like people want to talk about that, and that's perfectly fine. Not that I should mold myself to the world type of situation, but like, I think that there is value in that. Just like golf, for example.
Sure.
My best friend plays golf all the time, and I'm like, and I don't really care for the sport personally, but I was like, I want to hang out with my best friend. I'll just start playing golf.
There you go.
And so, yeah, I don't know why anybody does that either. But anyway, this isn't about me. This is about you. Before you were doing sales training, let's back up just a little bit. You were a teacher.
I was.
What made you want to be a teacher?
I love kids, man. Like I really love kids. I've always loved kids. Always. Still to this day, I'll go and volunteer at my daughter's kindergarten class, and I just love it. So I've always loved children. I've always loved the innocence and the authenticity of kids. And so I wanted to figure out what's the way I could work with kids. I always loved history. My dad was a history major, and my grandfather was a history major. And so I always liked history. I just figured that like this would be the perfect opportunity where I could work with kids all day and teach them something I had an interest in, like history, and bond with them and build a relationship and help be a positive influence for them in their life, help to connect with them. And so I just, man, I loved it. I loved it. I loved the coaching, the sports teams I coached, the teaching, the retreats. I loved all of it. I really did.
That's awesome. I love that. And the mentoring part, I'm sure, obviously, like you're still a teacher.
Yeah. In a lot of ways I am. I'm just teaching adults now. Yeah, but I am. And one thing you find when you do that is the adults are just big kids. I mean, that really we are. Like, we're just big kids who have figured life out a little bit more than our, teenage selves. Some people not as much as others.
Man, isn't that true? I think about that often now. I'm like, when is the epiphany going to happen that I'm an adult? Because I still think like a child, I feel like all the time. And I can't believe I've gotten this far.
Yeah. I feel like there's, the initiation into adulthood, whenever that is for people, it really begins when you make the decision to intentionally focus on your own growth. And that is really, in my opinion, like that's what being an adult really is. Like, because so I taught or coached some kids who were 15 years old, and it's like you have already begun adulthood. Like you're disciplined, you're taking yourself, like you're looking to get better, you're looking for feedback, you're looking to learn, you're taking what you're doing seriously when appropriate and not so seriously when not. And so I think that like that maturity is really, to me, like what determines what adulthood is. It's like what Jung talked about with the second half of life. The first half of life is building up that ego and making yourself comfortable and creating a personal identity for yourself so you can understand who you are and what role you play in the world and society. And then the second half of life is digging into that and seeing all the parts of it you don't need anymore. And then summoning the courage and strength to let them go. And some people never get to that second half of life spiritually. Other people get to it at 16 years old. It's just like really that. So that to me, everybody's different.
100%. What got you to stop teaching finally?
I think that I would be lying if I told you financially it wasn't hard. When we were pregnant with our second child, I've realized that if I put both my children, because my wife worked, so if I put both my children into daycare, I was going to be paying more money for someone else to watch my children all day than I made after taxes watching someone else's children all day. And that was a huge eye-opener to me, that like I would be working and really working hard and putting all my energy and passion into it and be making less money than if I just quit my job and stayed home with my kids. And I didn't want to do that. That just wasn't in the cards for me. And I'd always been entrepreneurial. I had a few side businesses while I was a teacher and always worked in the summer. And I come to find that initial seeds of transformation and change, it's like your soul whispers and your ego screams. And then the more you look into it, the more your soul begins to scream and your ego screams become a whisper. Yeah. And so over the last couple of years, it just became it just became more and more clear to me. Like, this is the move you need to make for you, for your family, etc. And so I did. It was pretty abrupt when I did it. It surprised a lot of people, especially my family. And it was really hard. It was heartbreaking to do, honestly.
Because was your dad a teacher as well?
He wasn't, no.
No?
No, my dad's an attorney. So,
oh.
Yeah, so, but I just loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. Like, it was hard to walk away from something I loved. I think one of the major, upon reflection of that time in my life, I realized that one of the major reasons I became a teacher, maybe major is too strong, but one of the reasons I became a teacher is because I knew I'd be good at it. It was one of those things where, and of course, 30-year-old Chris realized that actually 22-year-old Chris wasn't very good at teaching. He thought he was, but he wasn't. But for whatever reason, I just had a real confidence, even before even ever going into the profession, that, yeah, I'd be really good at that thing. And I think I did that in other areas of my life too. I like sought out opportunities where I didn't have to be bad. Like, I could just be good right away. And I think teaching was one of the reasons why I chose teaching. That's why I didn't become as good at playing drums as I could have, because I didn't want to be bad. And in order to learn new things and take your skills to a new level, you have to have a period of being bad. And I didn't want to do that. So I just kept playing songs I knew I could play and could play like the back of my hand, and didn't really get much better.
Dang, man. That's heavy. I wonder how many of us are stuck in a rut of maybe things that we don't love doing because we're scared of being bad at the thing that we would actually love doing.
Yeah. I mean, I would say if you took a straw poll of 100 people, you probably find that applied to 100 people in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
There's something that we're not letting go of, that we're investing our time, our energy, our passion into, that is not fully in alignment because of the convenience, because of the safety, and because of the security, psychological, financial, etc., that it offers us.
So you go from teacher to a career in sales.
Yep.
What were you selling?
I was selling sales training.
Great.
So I went right from teaching history to working for a sales training. And I was making cold calls, selling people into our sales training programs.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then eventually I started running and facilitating the trainings.
And just out of curiosity, this sales training program, was it for a specific industry, or is just for anybody?
No. So it was for a company called Sandler, which is like the largest sales. I think they're the largest sales training company in the world. They have 300 locations all over the world. Yeah, and it just so happened where I was from, Baltimore, was like the international headquarters and like where David Sandler was from. And so no, it's great training. It's industry agnostic. They have a consultative sales, clearly defined system. It's good stuff. I learned a ton. I believed in it. And I did everything I could to sell as many people into it as I could. Yeah. And then when I was ready and I knew the system and had dozens and dozens of sales calls under my belt and had learned, then I got up in front of the room and started doing the training, and which was really, I'm a teacher, so that's where I wanted to be. That's my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm curious, like, I would venture to say, I know that you weren't making maybe, a lot of money, and then when you did the math, you'd be losing money once you had kids as a teacher.
Yep.
But then, jumping into a new career in a sales position isn't always like super lucrative either.
No.
What was your family's feelings like?
My wife was really excited about me
Nice.
just leaving teaching.
That's cool.
Not because I didn't love it, but because it had just gotten to the point where it seemed like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for me.
Yeah.
And I was sharing that with her a couple times a week, my frustrations. And so I made less money when I transitioned into a sales role for a certain period of time. But that was never a real concern. I was willing, when I left teaching, I was willing to do anything. I was willing to get paid pretty much anything. You're not really going to find many jobs in the business world to pay less than what I was getting paid teaching. I was willing to take similar pay. I was willing to take less pay. I just wanted to go to the place where I could learn the most, the quickest.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was behind. I was I was 10 years into my career, and I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know anything about sales, about marketing, I knew nothing about nothing other than how to teach 16-year-olds about the Civil War. Like, that's what I knew. That was my thing. And so I just thought, which place can give me the most opportunity to learn and grow quickest? Because I knew that is something I had so much agency in. And if I really focused my energy and passion on growing and learning, then it would just pay off compound interest down the line for me, which has proven itself out. And so that's what led me to working for that sales training company. I turned down a handful of other sales jobs to take that one, and that one paid me the least and put the most onus on me. Least salary, no benefits at the time, and the salary was for, I think, a 3-month period, and then the salary disappeared.
Yeah.
It was all commissions after that. But I knew that there's no better place to learn how to be an effective salesperson than selling inside of a sales training company.
This is so interesting to me. So when you're going into this, when you quit your job or quit being a teacher, your job, was it immediate? Like, I'm going to go into sales because that's where the most potential was? Or you didn't think you're like, maybe I could be a mechanic? Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah. I didn't want to go into a trade. So like mechanic, that was a welder, those were off the table. I grew up a fancy boy. I didn't have to do too much manual labor. Not that I would be totally opposed to it or hadn't done it, but no, it wasn't. People had told me when I was teaching that I should be in sales. They told me I had family members and uncles who either were executives in businesses or owned businesses with sales teams. And they'd always joke with me, like, hey, when this whole teaching thing's over, you just let me know and you can come sell insert product or service at my company. And I always had that in the back of my mind, but I didn't want to do sales. I really didn't want to because I didn't like salespeople. Yeah. And I had a self-righteous streak in me. Certainly a moral one, right? That's all laced in victimhood and resentment, but at the time. But I didn't want to go into sales because I didn't want to be a salesperson. Yeah. Because I didn't know what people would think about me. If I were a salesperson, people would immediately assume that I'm willing to lie, I'm willing to manipulate something. I don't care about them. I just care about making money. I had a lot of real self-limiting beliefs around money. Like really bad. And so I applied for project management. I applied to be an assistant manager, at different offices, the Dwight Schrutes of the world. And, so I applied for all these different jobs and I got a handful of opportunities. The more I thought about it, the more I just realized that I needed to go into sales. Yeah. Because sales is the arena where my effectiveness directly leads to my income. Yeah. And growing up playing sports, I really believed in that. And I felt really empowered by that. Like, it is all up to me in this role. After 10 years of teaching, to where no matter how good I was, no matter how high the AP scores were, no matter how great the reviews were, no matter how much the kids liked me, no matter what, I already knew what I was going to get paid for the next 30 years. It didn't matter how hard I worked, didn't matter how good I was. And I have quite a few altruistic drivers in my body, but I don't quite have enough to just do that forever. Yeah. And so after 10 years of that, I was like, I want to get into a career in which it's totally flipped on its head and see what that's and just say, okay, there are no promises about tomorrow or next year. It is truly the better you are, the more you make, hands down. Yeah. And which is why I took that job with mainly based on commissions.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll go from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other end of the spectrum. And that role just fits me more because it's more entrepreneurial and it's just how I'm wired a bit more.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Totally. I love that. Sales is such an interesting thing. I believe that everybody should take a sales job, no matter what you go into. Whether you end up being a project manager in your career or whatever it is, at one point you're going to have to sell somebody as to why they should pay you more. So why they should hire you for a job, whatever the case may be. And so I think that sales is really important, but it's hard. And I think you're correct in that, or not, I think you're correct. I agree with you in that there's maybe a stigma around salespeople, because who do we think of, like gym membership, and no knock on anybody watching this stuff. All right. Gym membership, used car salesman, then we have the Wolf of Wall Street, then we have those types of things where it's like, it's about greed, it's about pushiness, that sort of thing. I'd love to hear a little bit about like your perspective on this and like, how are you training, teaching like a different mode than that?
So I think that we all remember our pain and painful moments more acutely than others. So oftentimes when I ask people in our training class, what was your first impression of a salesperson? Whether it was or it wasn't actually their first impression, they typically remember the bad stuff. And I agree with you that it's valuable for people to have jobs in sales. Before I quit teaching, I had bartended, I had waited tables, I had scooped ice cream for years to put myself, really to save up for an engagement ring in college. And when I got my first teaching job, which I couldn't pay my rent and my car payment, was my first my first teaching job's paycheck. I think I paid 21 grand, I think. I'm not that old, so it didn't go very far.
Yeah.
So I think that you're correct in that there's real value to working a job in which you have to interact with people all day, and to which you are responsible for trying to improve their experience. So whether that's hospitality or retail or traditional door-to-door sales job, something like that. Because interpersonal conflict, Alfred Adler talks about how interpersonal conflict is a core fear. That is the number one fear that all humans have, and it's connected to all of our problems in life, literally all of them, is the fear of interpersonal conflict. So the earlier in your life you can experience interpersonal conflict regularly and realize that you'll be okay, the better. And that's why like my 7-year-old and my 5-year-old are doing theater now. And I didn't force them into it. They love it. But I love that because there's a real sense of conflict there. And that's more intrapersonal, but you get up on the stage and you're performing for a bunch of people. And there's a lot going on there. Yeah. When those lights are on, you have to meet the moment. And so I think them getting that experience early in life will really help them just in their friendships and their social life and being able to carry along dialogue. So when you bring up like the stigma of the salesperson, it's absolutely true. And I've found that people in all walks of life have a tendency to be pretty inauthentic, myself included. And typically that's because they think they have to behave a certain way in order to show up in that role effectively. You see it in teaching, you see it in the medical field, you see it in sales, you see it all over. And I think sales is no different than that. Like the pushy salesperson, he or she thinks they have to be that way in order to do their job well. And typically they're overcompensating for how they really feel, which is they feel awful about being so pushy. They don't want to be pushy. And they have to convince themselves that in order to do their job well, oh yeah, it's great to be pushy. Yeah, it's great to be greedy. Yeah, who's got my money today? And it's just like you almost become a caricature of yourself. And so what ends up happening is a lot of times sales professionals develop this almost as like a callus to a deeper wound. And that deeper wound, when they were showing up with that story running their life, they were getting really hurt by all the no's and by the rejection that they would experience. So they wanted to adopt the Mamba mentality, so to speak. And yeah, maybe that can work if you're Kobe Bryant and you just turn it on 5 nights a week for a couple hours. But if this is like your all day, every day, it just has a shelf life. And so what I typically see with my clients is the problem honestly, the problems are much less that they are pushy, that they're aggressive, that they're manipulative, that they're greedy. In fact, it might sound crazy to hear, but I find the problems are the opposite. They're so afraid of being seen as that they basically give away all their personal power and just become overly passive. So you can think about the people that we worked with at that event in Austin.
Yeah.
They are experts in their field. They really know their shit, and they're very good at what they do. But man, if you saw them in an opportunity to actually sell their services, I can almost guarantee you they are going to show up with a tiny sliver of that confidence and that conviction, because they don't want to come off as greedy, pushy, aggressive, whatever it is. So what we do is we don't want other people to think that we're, say, pushy. So what we think is, how can I show up in a way that in no way, shape, or form makes anyone think I'm pushy? I know, I can just roll over. Like, I can just be really nice. I can just not ask any difficult questions. I cannot hold them accountable when they contradict themselves. You know what? I'm not going to set expectations or like clearly define an agenda for the meeting, because that might be clunky or awkward. So I'm just going to go in and just get to know them a bit and tell them a bit about our product. And look, if they want, if they don't, whatever, it's up to them.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, that's not who we really are. Like, that's not who we are. That is a programmed, conditioned way of showing up in the world. And so what I often see is usually that like overly aggressive, greedy, assertive salesperson, for the most part, they don't work with me. They're not interested in what I have to sell. They're not picking up what I'm laying down. Typically, I work with sales professionals that are doing a pretty good job, or a good job, or not doing great, but know that there's something, like they know they could be better.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be like that guy, but they know that this version of, like, they could be better, and they don't know why they aren't. And it's like there is a balance. There is a space between Dwight Schrute and Jim Halpert. and I would say very few salespeople show up as like the aggressive, overly direct, close the deal Dwight Schrute. Most of them show up as the Jim.
Yeah.
Who pretend like they don't care because they're not actually growing or learning or taking themselves seriously. And you saw that character development in the show, The Office.
Yeah.
Like, there were times where Jim was like, hold on, I do care about this. Like, I do want to be good. How would he be 90% of the time? Whatever, this is stupid. I don't really care. I'm just going to be the cool guy. And that is sales culture.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me that the role in the company that could arguably make more than anyone else outside the executive team is the role that people sometimes and oftentimes take the least seriously.
Yeah.
It's wild to me.
Yeah, man. Honestly, the potential is just really within that person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and how the company structures comp and everything else.
Yeah,
But,
right.
you can always, wherever you go, you take you with you.
Yeah.
So if you move on to another company, you take all the skills and lessons that you've learned up to that point, you take that version of you with you.
Totally. I think that you touched on something a little bit earlier, and it was like, I don't want to butcher what you were saying, but something
away.
something to the effect of maybe it could be relationship with self or relationship with money, and maybe what you thought you deserved in terms of compensation. Was there something that changed in you from, that you deserve more than what was what you were making as a teacher, and where you're like, no, I owe this to myself? Or was it strictly pragmatic?
No, it was mostly the former. And whenever I talk about this, I want to be as abundantly clear as I can, in that I think teaching is amazing. And I think teachers are amazing. And I worked with a lot of really amazing teachers. And there's a big part of me sometimes that wishes I didn't want something different. But I did. I just did. And I couldn't not want that. I do think that for me, it really, when it comes to money, I don't think it's more, I deserve more. I don't know, there's a real sense of entitlement that comes with a phrase like that for me. Yeah, but it was more like, I think if I stop being so damn scared that I could make a lot more. And I think that me making a lot more will be directly correlated to the impact I'm able to have. And I just want to see what type of impact I can have outside of this environment and what that will mean. And I would always joke with people that if I left teaching and I went into the business world and I found out I suck at everything except teaching history, I can go back and teach history.
Yeah.
People are always going to need teachers. But the moment I got into sales, my head trash was overwhelming. And my insecurities around money and what I was worth and what I deserved, quote unquote, deserved, or what I felt like I was worthy of going out and earning.
You're worthy of self-worth. That's the part that I butchered.
Yeah. It's like what I was worthy of trying to go out and earn, right? I really struggled with that. I still remember my hand shaking, making cold calls, like violently shaking. I was so nervous, and I felt like such an imposter for obvious reasons. And it's taken me years to really, and I still have a lot of work to do on the money side of things.
Totally.
Like I know that if I truly had nothing left to hang on to, I would be making a lot more money than I am now. Like I know that. So I know there's still a lot there. I just need to keep digging into it and recognizing it and working through it and letting it go.
Yeah. Head trash is something that you brought up quite a bit at EBC.
Yeah.
You know, what were some of the head trash things you dealt with? You mentioned your self-worth and things like that, but like, I guess we can even start with what is head trash?
Yeah, sure. So that's a phrase I picked up when I was at Sandler, and it's pretty ubiquitous in the sales world now, but it's basically self-limiting beliefs. Yeah. Things that you're telling yourself that are poisoning your own thought process. It's trash bouncing around your head. It's garbage. Like it needs to be removed. It doesn't belong there, but it's still there. And so for me, it would typically manifest itself. And these patterns exist in me. Like they are my own neuroses that just happen to manifest themselves acutely in a sales role. But it's not like the moment I went into sales, I started feeling insecure about my own self-worth or started being afraid of people. The phrase that would pop into my mind, like, if they only knew. If they only knew. If they only knew, like, how little I know about what I'm talking about. Or if they only knew that I lost my... Here, they hold me up as this paragon of whatever, parenting. If they only knew, I freaking lost my temper on my 3-year-old last night. And it's just like this feeling of being an imposter on the journey. And because when you're on the journey, you're never the person you're desiring to be. So for me, there's always a thread of imposter there because I know I can be future Chris, and I also know I'm not him yet, but I want to live into that. And some days I do better than others. And so those were the things for me, like what makes you qualified to do this? What makes you important enough to talk to? Where do you get off charging this amount of money? What types of results can you really drive? Those types of things that I just, I really struggle with them. And they rear their ugly head every now and then, still today. Totally. For sure. 100%.
Can we talk a little bit about a lot of the relationships with money that you might have seen in your experience and how that might be holding people back from their full potential there? Because I guess the anecdote is for me, I used to cold call as well. I don't know how long you've owned your business, but have you ever gotten the call like press 1 to be on the first page of Google?
No, not that long.
No, but
sounds like you were doing digital marketing.
Oh yeah, I was the guy on the other line.
Oh yeah.
And so we had the opportunity to sell like a lot. We had the opportunity to sell packages anywhere from $99 a month to $800 a month, and then setup fees and whatever else. And I'd sell a lot of the $99 a month ones. And I thought that closing those types of deals made me a good salesman because my ratio was like super high. My closing ratio was super high. I was like, no crap. I was giving it away. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until I had a talk with my sales trainer at the time or my sales manager at the time where this is a limiting belief that's what makes that good. And that's what makes you good is by selling a lot of these small deals. But truly, you're actually doing your opener a disservice because they go through a lot to give you that lead, and you can actually create more income for yourself and that person by selling higher, so on and so forth, those types of things. What are some of the like limiting beliefs that you're seeing on your end that are holding people back from, making more income for themselves, those types of things.
I think the most insidious one is the idea that making money is somehow bad. I really think that there are people throughout history who have abused, and they've used it for really terrible things. And people who you don't want to emulate, who used money and displayed it and shoved it in people's faces to cover up for some type of twisted superiority complex, to cover up for whatever other issues might be going on. But there is truly a very common thought process and belief that money is bad. Money in and of itself is bad. Ipso facto, if you make more money than is appropriate, then you're greedy. It's that simple. Like,
what's appropriate?
Typically that comes from how you were raised.
Yeah.
Like that all comes from how you were raised. The phrase is, don't ask people about how much money they make. Don't ask don't ask your uncle how much his car costs. Don't ask people their salary. Don't ask those questions. Sure, maybe in polite society they don't really make a ton of sense, but when 8-year-old Chris, who's told that, then is 28-year-old Chris, who's sitting across the CEO of a company trying to sell him a sales training package for $70,000. And I spent 3 hours clipping coupons in the grocery store, or to go to the grocery store with my dad every Saturday morning. It was $50,000. Who the hell would pay $50,000 for what I'm selling?
Right.
It's like all of our experiences are nothing more than a projection of who we are, right? So we just project it all out. And that's what I typically see, referring back to that event we were at in Austin with those incredible performance coaches. There's a limit to what they thought was like appropriate to charge people. And it's appropriate to charge people whatever value you're bringing to them.
Yeah.
That's what's appropriate, because it is all subjective. I told the story of going into the surf store when I first moved out here in Southern California. And I had a bodyboard in mind that I knew I wanted. I had been planning on getting the moment I moved out here. It was the most expensive one in the store. And I walked in, saw it. I'm like, yep, that's the one I've been researching. That's the one I want. And the sales guy was so taken aback by how quickly I made the decision to spend whatever it was, like $300, that he told me, he told me not to buy it. And he told me, why don't you you don't have to buy it today. You can go home and think about it.
Yeah.
Because he was projecting what $300 meant to him.
Sure.
And that, who is this guy walking in here buying this thing?
Yeah.
But it goes back to that old phrase, it's not too expensive, you just can't afford it.
Oh.
So the price of the thing isn't ever the issue. The issue is your relationship with the price.
Yeah. It's an interesting story with the salesman at the surf shop.
Yeah. I was just laughing. I'm like, man, get out of my way. I'm trying to buy this thing.
I may have had, and I still have a lot of issues with maybe what I'm worthy of, what we should charge or what I should charge, those types of things. But one thing I do know for sure is that when somebody says that's the one I want, you shut your mouth and you just take the payment.
Sure. You know? Yes, absolutely. Yes. When it comes to what you should charge, I think you should charge what people are willing to pay. And that changes. And as long as you're bringing value to them, it's worth exploring what people are willing to pay.
It's interesting. I don't know if you remember Tim Robbins from our he had the incredible story of surviving a tsunami. Why did that almost slip my head? That was crazy. But he actually has a quote that says, people don't care how much time it takes, people care about your solution. And if you can solve, the bigger the problem you solve and the quicker you can solve it, the more that they're willing to pay. I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think he's spot on. I think that one way that we look at it and we communicate to our clients is that anytime someone buys something, they're looking to go from where they are to where they want to be in some way, shape, or form. And if you can get laser focused on where they are and what impact their problem is having, what type of personal pain is causing them. And in our system, we call it like their prison. Mm-hmm. And then be able to project forward to them, what does their paradise look like? What would it look like if you could solve it? That's what they're paying for. I use this example a lot only because people can relate to it, because everyone has their own challenges with their physical health. If you are father of the bride, your daughter's getting married in maybe a year, and you're 40 pounds overweight and you want to be, what was it? Your fighting weight, your high school weight.
Yeah.
You want to be your high school weight. It's your daughter's wedding. So you got 40 pounds to lose in a year. When you pay to hire that personal trainer for, maybe $1,000 a month, who knows? It could be even way more than that. You're not paying for the workout plan. You're paying to be 40 pounds lighter a year from now. You're paying for the confidence it will give you, how you'll feel about yourself. You're paying for the discipline that it will create in you. It's why people want to run marathons. Not to run 26 miles, but because the discipline, it is a manifestation of discipline. And so that's what people are paying for. They're paying for the transformation from where they are to where they want to be. That's what they're paying for. In a business like yours, being able to determine the impact of the problem that they're having when it comes to their marketing or social media or whatever it is, and being able to determine what type of impact it will have to solve that problem immediately allows someone like you to determine what your value is to them. And all of a sudden, your standard price sheet doesn't matter, because what you're doing is you're coming in and you're solving a problem. Because if a personal trainer is talking to someone in Beverly Hills, movie star in Beverly Hills, who needs to get into insanely good shape because they signed a $30 million contract for a Gladiator movie, then all of a sudden the value of that intense 12-week personal training program takes on a whole different context.
Yeah.
The value of just the guy who lives in Beverly Hills who would like to get a beach body. There's so much more on the line. And that's why it's really important to hear from people, not just what's your problem, how's it impacting you, how's it impacting the business, how do you feel about it? We make all our decisions emotionally. But it's really important to then project, okay, and what would it mean to you if it could be solved? I use the example of, there's a famous baseball player, anyone who has a heroin problem has a problem. Period, right? That's a big problem.
Yeah.
And there are deeper problems below that. Josh Hamilton's heroin problem, Josh Hamilton was maybe one of the most naturally talented baseball players we've seen in the past 50 years. The value of rehab for him was, right? Just like that, because if he could get clean, he could make tens to $20 million a year playing baseball.
Yeah.
It's the value of providing him the solution is night and day from the value of maybe providing someone else a similar solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, isn't that crazy? Just all that talent. I guess, it happens so often. It's just especially, but with athletes, particularly with heroin, I don't know why that's crazy to me. For some reason, heroin problems in musicians, I guess we've gotten used to that. Sorry, that's completely different podcast, but it's true, right? We think so much that it's about a price sheet. Oh, here's how much this thing is. I think a lot of people in business development and sales, and let's just call it sales, we look at this price, this is how much this thing is, and that's maybe not the right question. Is what's your budget? It's maybe a better question is how big is this problem? Yeah, and how quickly do you want it fixed? What does fixing it look like to you? Because you may be talking to one company that says, when I worked with a marketing company maybe a year and a half ago, and we didn't work together very long. And one thing I found is that they took over different channels, social media channels for me. And I won't go into details, but just to say it didn't quite work out the way we had hoped. And what I realized is that they typically, the way they did it, solved a problem that I didn't have. The problem they solved were people who weren't on those channels, who just knew they needed to be on the channel. That was the solution they typically provide the solopreneurs of the world. My problem was not that I needed to get on the channel. I was already on the channel. What I wanted from them was for someone to take it over and take it to a whole other level. In fact, they just did for me what they did for other people, which then just came off as, for my audience, just really inauthentic. And not me, because it wasn't me. Right.
And so I think understanding, what exactly does solving the problem look like to you in your business? Because you may have some clients that are like, look, we just want to be on these channels. We want to get to 5,000 followers just to have 5,000, whatever it is. There may be other clients who say, no, we don't just want to be on this channel. We want to be seen as one of the leading brands in our industry based on our Instagram page or whatever.
Right.
And that's a totally different solution.
Yeah.
That's a totally different solution. And the value of that solution is night and day to the value of, we just know we should be on these channels and people will find us here. So we should just we know it's about time that we do that.
Got it. It's interesting how you contextualize that for me specifically, but I know that happens often for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like very similar to the 40 pounds before the wedding thing. It's like, no, I want to lose 40 pounds. I don't actually care about the regimen or whatever it is. Just make me lose 40 pounds.
Yeah. You're not, and people who are really committed are the types of people, and I love these clients who are like, it's almost like the personal trainer lays out the plan. The guys, will this get me there? If you follow this plan, this will get you there. Great. Let's do it.
Nice.
Because they want the transformation. That's what they want.
Yeah.
Of course, the regimen, the logistics, the amount of time, that stuff matters. But clients I work with that really want to get good at selling, really good, become exceptional at selling, they don't ask, but how many hours a week is the training going to be? Not that's not important or they shouldn't be considered, but they don't ask it with that energy.
Right.
They ask it more. I have one guy I signed up into our public accelerator program. He's an insurance broker, and I signed him up maybe a month or two ago. And he asked me, how much access to you do I get? How much calling you is too much? And I told him, I said, gosh, I know. You'll see by my pattern of picking up when you call. And I told him.
What a great answer.
Yeah, it's if I'm free and I pick up, then you're not calling too much. If I start ignoring all your calls, then maybe you are. But when I told him, I said, look, man, it is my dream to have a business full of clients that I eventually have to have a conversation with them about not calling me so much. That is it was like when I was teaching. I wanted the kid, or when I was coaching, I wanted the kid who say, Coach, can you stay after with me and work on my left foot?
That's exactly what you want, right?
Yes, that's literally why I'm doing this. I'm basically volunteering my time to coach an hour and a half every day. I would much rather coach 2 hours and have a half hour of it be singularly focused with someone who is just soaking up everything I'm telling them. Mm-hmm. And I think that commitment is make or break for client relationships. It really is, in a lot of ways.
Man, it's great when you end up working with people and you can tell that they're hungry. You ever watch The Boiler Room?
I have, yeah.
I've watched all the terrible sales movies.
Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross.
Yeah, all of them. We used to play them before the day started or whatever.
Yeah.
And what was the line that Ben Affleck had? I typically don't really like Ben Affleck as an actor. I don't know him as a person, but as an actor, I'm like, whatever, except for this role. And I just remember him saying, if you're asking how many days off you get out of here. You're an effing piker. And I'm like, I don't know what a piker is, but that sounds awesome. But it's that same principle, right? It's if you're already asking about how much time it's going to take, about from the perspective of with the energy of how much am I going to have to commit? You don't want it that bad.
Yeah. And they might not. They might have other things going on, but I think that it's just, it's that energy of which it was always really easy to tell who my favorite, I was human. I did not love all my players the same.
Yeah.
I didn't. But it wasn't it wasn't personal. I played the role of the coach. I could tell you which players I loved the most, the ones that wanted to be coached. It really was that simple. It didn't have anything to do with, obviously them being kind and them being a man for others and all that stuff's important. I was still, a faith-based teacher at the same time at that school. But it was just I'm showing up and giving this thing. I know how much value it has. And those that appreciate it are people I'm going to want to keep giving to. I'm going to want to keep pouring into those people. Yeah. Right? And so I think that's human nature.
Totally.
And I think that's really for us where we focused our efforts is there are countless sales professionals and entrepreneurs who we can transform their life. And if given the opportunity to do it, they would meet us halfway. Yeah. And they would do it. And we will really get the results that we know that individual is capable of. And we've just really focused our efforts on finding those people.
Yeah.
Not finding everyone, because there are going to be sales teams or salespeople or entrepreneurs who don't want to hear what I have to tell them, who won't want to summon the courage I'm asking them to do, who just don't see the world the same way I do, which is totally fine. And those just aren't the people for me.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I had a hard time when I first launched my company. I had a hard time really accepting that because I know I can help everyone if they come in with the right mindset. But I also know that not everyone's going to be. So not everyone's going to. So I had to just sort of adjust to that reality of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I got 2 more topics I want to touch on real quick.
Sure.
The first one is you created this system
Sure.
called the Sellasyouare system.
Sure.
And I'd love to learn a little bit about that. There's a lot of systems out there. I feel like this comes up like Grant Cardone's 40x, 10x, whatever he has, and
Sure.
all these things. Yours seems to have a different energy to it, which I love.
Yeah.
Of, maybe a little bit more authenticity. But can you share a little bit about the system?
Sure. So it primarily, all of our work with clients always begins with looking at how they're showing up. What type of head trash do they have? The different ways in which they're being inauthentic or lacking courage in their own role. And I would say and I know that this phrase will come off as derogatory, and maybe I mean it that way as I'm saying this out loud, but like the amateurism. Like they're getting paid, but they're not showing up like a professional would. They're showing up like an amateur. And in sales all the time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, all the time in sales. And that's why there's so much resentment in so many companies. The office, once again, like everybody hated the sales team, right? And so we look at that and we talk about certain non-negotiables one should have as a sales professional. And I reference a book by Stephen Pressfield that I read and I love called Turning Pro. And he was a writer, obviously. But like that was like, he wasn't something and an author. He was purely just an author. He was a novelist. That's all he did was write. And he talked about his journey of adapting a mindset before he had any money and any books anybody wanted to read. Of this is what these are the disciplines a professional writer implements into their life. Like this is what being a professional looks like. And he talks about how like the night he made that shift, he literally, I think he like emptied the dishwasher. And he was just like, yeah, this is what a professional writer does. He takes care of his dishes. Like he did, it's like those little things.
Yeah.
And so we talk about those like non-negotiables because when I first was in my sales role, I didn't know my ass from the hole in the ground. And so I read that book and then I just thought, man, I'm going to all these networking events with all these other salespeople and they're just getting loaded and like they're not trying to set appointments. They're not looking for opportunities. They're not being intentional about their conversations. I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. Wow, these people are getting paid 2 to 3 times what I was getting paid teaching. And I was waking up crack of dawn and working all night. And I was like, wow. And that's what made me realize, okay, so if I'm going to be different than them, if I'm going to be exceptional in my own way, I need to turn pro. And so I just thought about what are those things I need to do differently. And so we have a list of what we call the sellasyouare commandments or non-negotiables that we take all of our clients through and to begin to change their mindset, to show up from a place of authentic courage, like real courage. And that begins with speaking the truth. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie, but tell the truth all the time and make sure you're actually helping the person as opposed to helping yourself. Because if there's someone I know that I can help and they have trouble getting out of their own way to work with me, I am not helping them if I say, oh yeah, no problem, just whenever. Give me a call whenever. That's not, in that scenario, that wouldn't be me helping them. Me helping them would say, look, you told me you have a problem. It's having this enormous impact on your life. I can help you. And I know it's scary. And I know the investment of time, energy, money, whatever, is something you just don't quite feel ready for. I can help you, dude. Do it. Do it. That's like speaking the truth. Teaching people how to show up with more courage, more truth, more authenticity. Step into their power. Really, step into their power in an authentic way. And when you step into your power in an authentic way, you aren't greedy, aggressive, pushy, anything like that. Because you're telling the truth the whole time.
Yeah.
So you're not going to sell something just to sell something because that's untruthful, right? You're not going to manipulate a situation because that's untruthful. But you are going to assert yourself when you believe you need to and walk away when you think you need to. So we work on that first, that inner game, right, of sales and like connecting like our soul's purpose to what we're doing and the role we're in. And then we have a 6-step framework that walks people through exactly how to run a consultative sales process. And it has very specific recommendations. It has, script recommendations, formats, like different parts of it within the system. But we also encourage and coach people to be themselves within it. This is what Chris Caldwell would say. Notice that the objective is to achieve this alignment with the prospect. This is what I would say. Now, what would you say? How would you say it? How does it feel right to you? How does it feel true to you? And we teach the system, and then we do ongoing coaching and training.
Yep.
In our public, like individuals or small sales teams join our sales club, and we just continue to sharpen the saw. And then larger corporate clients, I do specific to their company, ongoing monthly, weekly or monthly training because it takes a while to get better. It really does. Like sales is a true skill, and it takes real effort and commitment to be exceptional.
Yeah.
Just like anything else.
A lot of practice.
Yeah, a lot of practice.
A lot of practice. I love just specifically one thing that you pointed out that I love is it's like, hey, here's how I would say it. Now tell me how you would say it. I think that's such a great shift from how I learned sales. How it wasn't like boiler rooms. It was like, read this script.
Sure.
And just walk around and it'll work. And it did actually. But saying something in
it works to a certain extent.
To a certain extent.
It does. Yeah,
right.
It does work to a certain extent.
Because we're solving small problems, maybe.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It's also the 80-20 rule. You can get yourself 80% of the way there in an environment like that with 20% of the effort. But for the most part, what we're looking to do in a true consultative sales process, in B2B, we're talking about tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line in these deals and conversations. Like you can't just memorize. Like it is worth the investment of time and energy to become really damn good.
Yeah.
And so that's how we do it. And there are a lot of different sales systems out there. And I obviously love the one we have. I believe in it wholeheartedly. And it's driven some real transformational results for my clients. That said, if nothing else, just learn a system and stick to it.
Yeah.
Whether it's Challenger, whether it's Sandler, whether it's Dale Carnegie, Miller Hyman, Sales Gravy, JB Sales, like what gap selling, like whatever.
Yeah.
Pick one, go all in, get really damn good at it.
And to Grant Cardone or anybody that does that, I actually don't know what that program's all about. I just assumed it was sales, so I apologize for what.
No, Grant Cardone's a fail. No, Grant Cardone has like Cardone University, and but he's more of how do you overcome objections. He has a lot of different courses on a lot of different stuff, but he's more about the mindset of going out and it's like going out and taking what you deserve type of thing, and who's got my money, and this is how you overcome objections. And the overcoming objections is always to get people to buy the thing you have, whether they want it, need it, can afford it, can actually help them, doesn't matter.
Right.
And I don't know, there's a little bit of finality to that. So.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I can, the sentiment is the same here.
Sure.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was you mentioned, and I brought up like a lot of the limiting beliefs that maybe you had that was holding you back, from stepping into your potential, let's say. But now I'd love to learn what are some of the more abundant beliefs that you've had that you've incorporated either yourself or that you've seen amongst some of the clients that you've worked with that's truly allowed them to get closer to what their full potential is. What are some of those mindsets that have embodied that have truly changed their life or your life?
Sure. Well, I think one thing for me is that one thing that's been really helpful for me, and like I said, I transitioned out of teaching 10 years into my career. So I felt like I was behind. And so I felt like I needed to catch all the way up. And one thing that's been really helpful for me is just thinking about like, how could I be 1% better tomorrow? That's it. Not 100% better, 1% better. If I were a little better tomorrow than I am today, what would that look like? And because of the patterns of self-sabotage I have created and noticed in my life, 100% better day to day is just not a formula that works for me. And more often than not, it would like short circuit my progress because it would push me so far outside my comfort zone, so far outside of who I still believe myself to be, that it would have a snapback effect. And so what's been really helpful for me and for my clients is leave the shame and guilt behind. Leave that with your church, with your parents, with your teacher, whatever. Whoever taught you that growing up. Shame and guilt is insanely powerful. And the reason it's really powerful is because when you adopt or are taught a pattern of shame and guilt, the individual who gives you the shame or the guilt is the only one who can then relieve it. And that's why it is a social tool for different organizations, churches, faiths, like businesses, whatever, right? Social groups. And it's because it keeps people stuck in that place. And because they're the only ones that can then relieve you of it. They're the only ones that can give you the permission to, okay, you don't have to feel guilty about that thing I made you feel guilty about anymore. And what happens is we get this like misconception that the shame and the guilt is what led us to change our behavior. But that's rarely the case. And if it is, it doesn't last. So what I really focus on with our clients is leave the shame and guilt behind. Let's just be as objective as we can about how you performed, how you showed up, how did it work out for you, what were the consequences? No judgment. What were the consequences, good or bad? How'd they work out? How'd that make you feel? Do you want to do that again? The lesson will continue to appear until the lesson's learned. But the lesson's only learned when your actions follow the information or the knowledge. Okay, you said that on the call. Guy reacted in that way. You lost the deal. I told you to say this. You said that. Let's talk about that. Like, how do you feel? If that's okay, you don't want to repeat it again. Okay, I know that what I recommended to you before was a bit outside your comfort zone. So let's just edge you a little closer to it. Because you got, 30 years left in your sales career. You don't have to become a black belt tomorrow. Let's get you a little closer. Okay, and then when you do that, come back to me. We'll talk about it, and I'll push you a little further. And then a year from now, you won't recognize the person you show up as. And so that's what's been most helpful to me, is giving people agency in determining the rate of growth that they really are ready for, and then giving them the freedom to do it, to have the sovereignty to decide, is this something that I'm not your parent, I'm not your teacher, my self-worth isn't on the line. I know this stuff works. If you don't do it, I know it won't work, but I won't feel like any less because you don't do it. So empowering them, giving them agency, giving them sovereignty over their future and their actions, holding them accountable in a way I believe is appropriate and loving to them, and then leaving all the shame and guilt behind.
Those are great, man. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah. Man, you shared so much with us today and so much value out of it, like just mindset changes, some habits that we can incorporate, and of course, some incredible stories too. Before we sign this off, if somebody wanted to connect with you, how can they find you?
Sure, they can find me on LinkedIn. That's my most active social platform is LinkedIn. Just find Chris Caldwell on LinkedIn. There are a shit ton of us, so find the one who is the CEO of sellasyouare. Or they can go to my website, sellasyouare.com, or find me on Instagram, Facebook, at sellasyouare.
Amazing. And for the record, we were not the social media company that was working with you.
No, you were not. No, you were not.
Imagine it's just like, yo, we burned you. Can you come back for a podcast interview? Make it right? That would suck.
No, it was a company on the East Coast. Yeah, it did not work out.
Oh, man. Thank you so much again for your time. And to the listener, viewer, thank you for your time and attention. We really appreciate it. If you loved the interview, we would dig a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it that much, feel free to stick it to us, but subscribe anyway, because we're going to have a bunch of incredible people just like Chris Caldwell back on the show. Thanks again, man.
Awesome. Thank you.